Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the first ever episode ever of the Stadia UK podcast. My name's Gordy. I'll be your host from now until I give up caring about this channel. No, I'm kidding, guys. Looking for a new hobby that's game related to get myself out of my funk at work. And yeah, this will be a good intro. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of people will be asking what's happening. Straight off, it'll just be me talking today to you guys. I do have another co-host coming on, Jordan, who will be kind of, talking about Stadia with me and talking about games in general. But then we want to really focus this channel to 100% Stadia news, maybe even exclusively Stadia UK news, stuff that's happening within the UK and maybe even Europe. Because there's a lot of channels I've seen pop up. One of the first was Stadia Cast, and those guys are awesome across there. They do really good work. But then, of course, they are in the US, so I feel like their experience will be slightly different to the one we'll have across in the UK and obviously Western Europe. So yeah, it's an interesting time where I just wanted to get this up and running and just make something, because the channel was kind of sitting empty. I had a few trailers up that were just really up there for people to get a whole vibe of what Stadia is and a couple of things that were coming to it, games and services, and then talk about more of why, I wanted to get involved in Stadia and make this channel. So straight off, I have been making videos on YouTube for a long time. I started way back in 2009, where I made a gaming channel. I think you guys could probably still find it. It's called Gordy Games. The other one was Video Games Nut. I used to review games. I used to work for websites, going to events. And I really, really loved doing that. It was a great passion I had for working within YouTube. And then I left my job a couple of years ago to pursue my dream of working in games as an artist, and I'm currently doing that. So, dream come true. But then, of course, I have another channel which is related to games industry stuff, which is Digital Artcast. That channel in particular is just for industry people and then students and stuff like that. So I interview games artists from around the world and talk to them about, their process in making games. But this is different. Because Stadia is one of these things that has piqued my interest for a long time, ever since it was announced. I think, back in GDC last year or March. I can never remember when the initial announcement of it was. But yeah, so I've been really interested in cloud gaming, especially not just Stadia, but I was an advocate for cloud gaming way back in the day. I was one of OnLive's early beta testers in 2010, 2011, where they had built a service around cloud gaming, and I had obviously signed up and thought this would be a great thing to do. I'd always loved the idea of a digital future, especially for games, to kind of take them wherever you go and not have to worry about downloading and platforms. And I think it appealed to me at the time as well, because although I had video game consoles, my main computer at the time was a Macintosh iMac, and those machines are synonymous for not being able to run video games in general. There is occasionally ports, obviously, of other big titles that come across, but it's not really inherently built for gaming. You really need a PC for that. So at the time I was like, this is great, I can use OnLive on my Mac as well and play PC games at the time. And I think that service launched with one of the original, not the original, but the reboot or kind of reimagine of Deus Ex that came out from Ubisoft in 2011. They were kind of touting that as their exclusive game, one that was going to launch on OnLive. So I signed up to play and test out OnLive back in the day, and it was great. Funnily enough, the initial beta test was only available in the US, but through some kind of, I don't know what I'd use the word as, like, not lying, but yeah, like I pretended that my address and everything was in the US, and I got access to OnLive. I got to log into it. So I was actually initially running the service off the US servers from the UK, which you would think to yourself, that's crazy. It's absolutely mad. The latency must have been ridiculous. Now, the the video quality was never like 4K, or I think it maybe was even just a little below 1080. But the game played fine. Like, I mean, especially I could log into uh uh, I could still log into the game service, and I could still play games just the same as if I was in the US, and play through them, and there was no real inherent difference I could feel from running the game locally and running the game in the cloud. So it was really interesting. It was really interesting because at the time I thought, because of the distance from the UK to the US, obviously, it would cause this huge lag spike where um, it would make the game unplayable. But surprisingly enough, the games were very playable. They were very, very responsive, and I could load into the games. I think the longest I waited for a game to load was maybe 20 seconds. It was it was very quick. You'll actually see if you go to the Instagram we have for Stadia UK. I think it's just at Stadia_UK. I put a video up of me playing the service in 2011, and you'll find the video on my old channel. I think it's Gordy Games or Video Games, not one or the other. I might even try and link it below. And yeah, you'll see how quickly I log into the game and play it, successfully. Occasionally, there would be lag where something would inherently go wrong, or a stick would get stuck, or the video would artifact for a couple of seconds. But considering this technology is now 10 years old and it was run from the US, it was absolutely amazing. In fact, I think I possibly have a video of me playing that service when it came to the UK, because they launched in the US first, and then the UK came, I think, 6 to 8 months later. And then that would have been even better, because the servers were then locally in London, which was closer to where I am in the UK. So yeah, it was a great service and a great way to introduce myself to cloud gaming. And obviously, down the line on live, got into a bit of trouble where, I don't know where it was financially or just the way the technology was running. The service died. They kind of just abandoned it, which is obviously another concern that I'm saying obviously a lot. A concern that people have with Google Stadia, where they think if Google invests their time into this service and it doesn't go well, it'll be like this website where they have the Google graveyard where apps go to die, like Google Glass and other things. So people are thinking inherently that if Google fails with this service, it will just go to the graveyard, and people's kind of time and money that they invest in these video games will be lost, which is a legitimate concern. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that, it's not going to be really bad if Google launched the service and then something goes wrong and it doesn't work out. But what I'm trying to, kind of get across here by talking about OnLive and my experiences with the service back in 2011, I'm talking about this as a point to show that almost 10 years ago, I was playing a service that worked almost perfectly. And this was from like a small indie company a decade ago, and that worked pretty well. So this multi-billion-dollar company that invests in all this infrastructure across the planet with super low latency, data centers everywhere, the money and the teams they have behind this project, luckily, because my day job is working within the games industry, you hear rumors on the wind about people who are moving to this project or what Google's doing to invest in it. And they have thrown a lot of money behind this project, like so much money. I was watching an episode of Game Over Greggy's, or Kind of Funny's channel, sorry, Kind of Funny Games. And they had a new show called, I think it's Our Cool Friends, or We Have Cool Friends. And one of them was, I totally forget the guy's name, but he's the head of the games, like the games department in Google Stadia. And he was one of Greg's friends, and he was talking about, he moved to the project from PlayStation to take on this mantle of running the games the games section of Google Stadia, because he was so impressed with the technology. And the teams they are building, the people that are going to these projects are huge people. The former, again, I forget the name. I really should have. Next show, I will have show notes. I will have points where I can bring up things. But I know the former Ubisoft games director has now moved to open the Google Stadia games studio, which is the first party studio for Google Stadia, where they're now investing in their own games, their first party games. But yeah, there's a whole host of talent that is coming to this project, and again, Google has invested, if not millions, probably billions of dollars in their infrastructure, and they're such a huge company that they wouldn't go into this thing half-heartedly, and again, on the We Have Cool Friends show, the person who was on with Greg was talking about how there's so much investment behind this. There's so much, there's such a huge roadmap that shows years and years into the future what Google is planning to do, with their whole infrastructure, and their whole roadmap shows about how where they're going to go in like a year's time, what features they want to have implemented in 2 years' time. When they're going to go to 8K, when they're going to go to 120 frames per second, when are they going to introduce AI learning, how many games they want to have by a certain point. Like, this is all laid out really cohesively. I just kind of googled really quickly. It was Jack Jack Boozer, who was, he's the director of games at Google Stadia, and he was talking about that. He's talking about there's such a long what's the word the thing I'm trying to say is that there's such a long time investment from Google. Like, they're not planning to get 6 months in and then think like, where do we go from now, or get even a year in and think, where do we go from now. The plans they have in place outline their roadmap for the next maybe 5 years, because when you invest so much money into a service like this, you really need to have a plan that is very solid, that is very on point, that is very like, here's our key markers, here's the targets we need to hit. We need to, of course, they're a business, so they're like, we need to make this much money, we need to make this much revenue, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, there's a whole thing of, they have markers, they have targets. Of course, they're a business, but then, for this to succeed, they need to be making revenue. But yeah, they're not going into this half-heartedly. They're very invested in the future of Stadia and where it's going from now. Now, thinking about this, I could be eating my words in 6 months, or something might happen that I can't foresee. But for the years I've played cloud gaming games and the years I've saw these services come and go, I have a good hunch that Google Stadia will be the most successful, if not the poster child for cloud gaming, where this is how it's done. This is the kind of technology you have to invest in. This is the kind of money you have to set aside. I really think that Xbox and PlayStation will be watching Stadia with both eyes and making sure that they take notes on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And of course, this is Google's first, their first, what's the word I'm trying to say? The first thing they've done that is related to mainstream AAA gaming console, kind of, the whole console war thing. That this is their first thing they're doing, that's properly been an investment into this industry. So of course, they're not going to do everything right. There will be mistakes, just like everybody. A lot of companies make mistakes very often, and then move on and learn from them. But yeah, Google obviously have a roadmap and things they want to accomplish, but it doesn't mean that everything they do will be great. Everything they do will be amazing. There will be bumps in the road, but that's just to be expected, because part of this isn't just that you're releasing another box or a games console. That in itself has issues. What you're doing is releasing a cloud gaming service, which is still very new to the market, which is something we've seen within TV shows and movies for many years now. Netflix went digital, I think 2009, 2010, maybe even before that, and yeah, they've become one of the biggest producers of content on the planet. You know, you look at Netflix now, how many exclusive TV shows they're making with the money they get from Netflix subscriptions. Now you think of that as well. They're not selling boxes. They're not selling, you know, DVRs or you know, satellite um, cable boxes, anything like that. They were just asking for money every month and licensing movies onto their platform. And they have revenue streams of billions that they've invested back in to make their own first party movies and TV shows. So the plan or the roadmap that, you know, Netflix has probably followed is probably very similar to what Google are planning, where the initial stream of premium users will attract a lot of money and revenue that will then be recycled back into new technology investments, and then their game studios, their first party game studios, to make their own games. And then you'll find in a couple of years' time, Google will be making their own video games, will be making their own, well, just video games, but you know, but they'll be making multiple ones. They'll open maybe multiple departments within that studio to make different games. And then, yeah, you'll have games that are made by Google's, you know, first party studio, you know, might even be releasing on exclusively on Google Stadia at first, but then they might come to things like Xbox and PlayStation eventually. Who knows? Who knows what the plan is? But yeah, there's definitely a plan in place, which I think is something that should be making people really, making them, you know, more at ease in the long run, because again, I think a lot of these smaller cloud gaming situs that come up are usually not destined to fail, but have a problem staying afloat because they don't have the capital to back something like this. You know, on Live, I think at the time was started by one guy and a small team in California or wherever they were based, and yeah, they just didn't have the infrastructure that was primarily theirs. That's also what it is, you know, because Google own so much network infrastructure that they can just push traffic wherever they want it. So yeah, you're not going to get, you know, bottlenecked in certain places on the internet because the pipelines they're using are primarily just for Stadia. They're not for, well, they're for Google, but they're, you know, they're not for like AT&T or Verizon. They're just for Google Stadia. So that's why you get that really super low latency. Even the fact that people don't understand that the controller you connect doesn't actually connect to any of your devices. It actually connects straight to the the Google Stadia service centers and interacts with it directly. So you're not even interacting with like the Chromecast or your phone or the PC. You're interacting physically with the Stadia servers, which is a great piece of technology that I've never seen before, and I think it's really exciting. And yeah, just things like, you know, I saw the other day, like small things that kind of put me at ease, where there was a kind of disclaimer at the bottom of one of their game service posts when they talked about how games are purchased on Stadia. Right at the bottom, it said that, you know, not verbatim word for word, but what it basically said was, if a game's license is lost on Stadia and has to be removed from Stadia, if you've already bought that game, or claimed it through, you know, the premium membership, that game will always be in your library and you will always be able to access it no matter what. Like, even, you know, like say you buy Borderlands 3 when the game launch, or when the service launches on the 19th of November. If Gearbox want to remove from Stadia and then take it elsewhere, as long as you've bought it, you'll always have that game on Stadia, even though other people might not have access to it. Very similar to what Steam was doing years ago, where, you know, they would lose licenses for certain games on Steam, but if you had bought the game, you still had access to download it. So yeah, there's a whole thing, or a whole set of images and paragraphs I've came across as I've been researching more about Stadia, where you hear snippets of things where you're like, that's reassuring, or that's what I want to hear, that's the kind of language I want to hear. The only thing I think that's gave me pause for thought or some worry leading up to the launch is the fact that Stadia has announced that at launch, specifically just at launch, the controller will work wirelessly with the Chromecast, but not wirelessly with the other devices, such as your laptop, your PC, your phone. Those will all need to be wired situations, which is fine for me because, yeah, I'll be using the controller for the Chromecast, but ideally when I come to sit in front of my PC, I'll just use my mouse and keyboard. So that's not really an issue for me anyway. But yeah, I can understand why people might have a concern, because sure, it's something that we didn't really know was going to be a thing, and all of a sudden it is a thing, and now you're kind of thinking, well, if this is one hiccup they're having, what else is going wrong? But I think in general it's only a small thing. I don't think it's a major bump in the road. I think it's just a hiccup, if anything. And again, they stated at launch, I'd imagine by the time this launches in 2020 full time, that will be ironed out along with another few kinks. Because I mean, there's a whole bunch of Stadia features that people have not really even talked about that are coming, that are just beyond the normal game service. And the fact that you can run these massive games that aren't even possible on consoles. Like 1v100 is very popular just now with Fortnite and PUBG, but Stadia was like, yeah, we could run like 1v1000 or 1v like 5000. And initially they're saying the Stadia Pro users will get access to 4K 60 FPS, which is obviously amazing. But then they're like, in the immediate future, we'll be looking to make that 8K and 120 FPS. Sure, not everybody will run in 8K devices, but the fact that they're investing in this technology and making these kind of promises is great. It shows that they've got a real roadmap and an idea from where they want the service to go initially to, and then end up at. So it's great. I'm really, really pleased that they've got a real strategy in mind. And the fact that people can spectate on your games and then comment while they're spectating. You can make game clips and upload them. There's a whole host of things that people haven't really thought about that is getting launched as part of the service, that we've never even really thought about. And the fact that you can open a browser and be in a game in 5 seconds is just phenomenal. So yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are going to be really, really good. And I'm really excited for the service. I'm going to probably come off just now, guys, and leave it there, but I'll be back with Jordan hopefully next week, and we'll put up another episode, and we'll talk maybe more in depth about subjects. I'll get some proper show notes. We'll dive deeper into some different talking points. If you have anything you want us to talk about on Stadia UK, just leave comments down below, or on Instagram or any other channels on social media. I'll try and link those below. And yeah, just check us out wherever you can, and stay tuned for the next episode. That would be really, really awesome. And yeah, guys, I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much for tuning in for this very first episode. If there's anything at all you would like me to change or address, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you guys. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks, guys. Bye.